Hello, this is Noreen Crone Findlay from Crone-Findlay.com and toddytalkscrafts.com. Today's video tutorial is a way that I figured out of how you can weave a triangle on the Zoom Loom. It was a bit tricky to work this out, so kind of pay attention. There are some things that you specifically have to do in order to make this work. And that, of course, is why I've made the video. Now, here are my Earls. Crone-Findlay.com is my website, and you can buy my PDFs and ebooks and patterns there. Same thing with Etsy. You can get those. Everything is there available, and I've got them all as instant downloads on my Etsy shop. And there's Toddy Talks Crafts. Here's YouTube. And if you want to follow me on Facebook, this is the Earl. It's Noreen Crone Findlay Designs with no dots or dashes or spaces. So let's get weaving some triangles. To weave a triangle on the Shack Zoom Loom, what you need to do is you, of course, need to have your Zoom Loom. You need yarn. You also need a weaving hook. Now you can use a steel crochet hook and grind off the thumb rest. That makes it a more usable tool than with the thumb rest on. My favorite tools for weaving on pin looms are loop turning hooks that I buy at the fabric store. It has a little latch hook, and then it's on a long wire with a loop on the end. Of course, you need scissors too. So I'm using just one strand of, this is the acrylic yarn that comes with it. It's a little glittery. It comes from the Lion Brand Bonbons package. And because I want my triangle to be quite soft and drapey, I'm only using one strand. If you want a thicker triangle, then use thicker yarn or two strands held together. Now, what we're going to do to start is we're going to take our strand of yarn and we'll go across the loom diagonally and loop around that corner pin just to measure out how much we need to have as a tail. So take that off and place the tail in the notch. Now skip the first pin and on the lower edge and the upper edge, and come back down into the space next to the previous one. And now lightly and not tightly go back and forth, up and down your loom until you have reached the other side. So you don't want to put a whole lot of tension on your yarn. You need it to be pretty softly placed on the loom, because if you, I have a dog who's just stolen my yarn. So I'm going to go retrieve my yarn, and I'm going to go all the way to the edge here and come back. But right now I have a rescue mission to do with my yarn. Rotten little dogs. Okay, there, I've rescued my yarn. Honestly, Chihuahuas are worse than cats when it comes to snitching yarn. I was just saying to you, don't have your warp strands really tight, and all of a sudden it was like, ooh, I couldn't even move the yarn, and it was because my little friend had taken off with the ball of yarn across the studio. Anyhow, he does make life more complicated for sure. So I will now take my yarn tail out of and as you can see, I have worked my way all the way across, and there's one pin that's empty on the upper right hand side, and the yarn has come down to the lower edge. Now I've taken the tail end out of the notch, and I'm going around this pin, the furthest one in this cluster of 4 at the beginning. I'm going across to the empty pin up at the upper right hand corner and coming down and putting the tail end back into the notch. Now I'm going to just measure out a length of yarn off of the tail end of the ball, or off the working end of the ball, and that's going to come down to the lower edge again. Now I'm going to weave under 2, over 2, all the way across the loom. So under 2, over 2, under, over, under, over, all the way across the loom. And there are 2 ends. I bring my hook over the diagonal, and there are 2 ends that are under the diagonal, and I'm going to lift the first loop off of the upper edge, and I'm going to scoot my hook out to meet that loop, and the loop comes over the diagonal. That's very important. It has to come over the diagonal. And now I've brought it all the way across to the edge, and I'm going to take the loop, the tail end that's at the right hand corner comes through that loop. Now I don't have to put the loops onto the pins, and it's probably better on the loom to not do that, because if I put if I'm putting the loop up onto the pin, that can kind of put pressure on the pin, and I don't want to do that. So now I'm just, my next row, I am weaving. I started out over 2, under 2. So I work across again, picking up the ones that I went under before. I'm going over, and if I went over it, I'm going to go under it. And once again, I bring my hook over the diagonal. It always has to go over the diagonal. And I pop that loop of yarn off of the upper edge. I'm going to take it out through one of the little gateways here, just so it's easier to catch it. Bring it across, and I will move down here so that my rows are more lined up. And once again, the yarn that was at the lower right hand side of the loom goes through that loop and beat them into place. Third row is an odd row, so I start by going under and then over. So each time I am weaving across, every row actually gets shorter. The first couple of rows are kind of clumsy to weave, but it does get quicker and easier as you progress. Okay, my hook comes over the diagonal, pick up, and place that loop. I go out the gate there with it, because it's just at the beginning. It's kind of crowded there, and it's easier if I do lift it off. Okay, and the loop, I'm going to lift this up to the camera so you can see the loop is still on the hook, and then I take the yarn end through, and that secures the weaving. So now, as you can see, by lifting the loop off the top set of pins and folding it down over the hypotenuse, the diagonal, and weaving it through, you can see that the triangle is being formed. like I said, this took a lot of figuring out, and I figured out how to weave triangles on the potholder loom, and I found that doing almost the same technique on the Zoom Loom is the way to go. I tried several different techniques on the Zoom Loom, and wouldn't you know, the simplest one is the best one, but sometimes you have to go through real complexity to get to that simple solution. But there we have the simple solution that just works beautifully. So hooray for simplicity. Okay, thread goes through the loop, and there we go. Okay, I'm going to keep weaving. I'm using the tail end of my crochet hook just to beat that into place. And you do get a balanced weave because you're going under 2 over 2, and of course your threads, by taking the loop off, that's 2 strands. So I'm going to keep weaving, and I'm going to go right to the top, and then I'll come back and show you how to finish off. Okay, I've woven all the way to the top. Now I stopped just before the last loop. The last loop is on here's the hypotenuse loop. The diagonal loop is on this corner loop, corner pin, but I'm going to lift the last loop off. It's the second pin, and pull it through. And now I will simply lift, put my hook into the loop that was the diagonal or the hypotenuse, and lift my triangle off, and it's complete on all 3 sides, are all completely woven. There is a little loop down here. Remember we wrapped around the number 1 pin here. So I like to just take and twist, put the hook in, twist it once, and then pull the yarn end through there. And there you have it. I'm just trying to pull I dropped a hair there. A triangle woven on the Zoom Loom. Because there are times in your design work when being able to weave that triangle is a very good thing. So happy weaving, and enjoy creating all kinds of magical and wonderful things. Happy weaving. Go gently. Be well.